Hi everybody. So I got a question in my last live stream about the end times timeline about the 6,000 years of world history, and what I wanted to do is just do a quick review for those of you who might be new to my channel. I understand that there are a lot of people who think that there are going to be 6,000 years of world history. There are not exactly 6,000. The reason why they say that is because they take the 50 years of Jubilee, say 120 Jubilees, which is Genesis 6:3 taken way out of context, and say 6,000. And you go back to the pattern of the Sabbath established in Genesis 2 after God's creative week. 6 days he worked, the seventh day he rested. That was written into the law for Israel in Exodus 20, written into the law for Israel regarding the land Sabbaths in Leviticus 25, and then Peter in 2 Peter 3 gives it as an overview of world history. But what I want to draw people's attention to is Peter's use of the word "is as." Peter was instructing us to understand that the timeline of world history is in the likeness of the Sabbath. It's not going to be exact, and it can't be, because Jubilees are not 50 years apiece. It is in the 50th year, hallow it and proclaim Jubilee. So I'm going to take you through a very easy way of discerning that there are not precisely 6,000 years of world history. There are actually 6,034. And those extra 34 years relate to Jesus's life from a point to a point. There were 34 years. It wasn't from his birth, but that's what those wind up relating to. However, it is very, very easy to discern that there are not exactly 6,000. I had this video that I did recently. I want to say, when did I put this up? 3 days ago. It says the math doesn't work for 50-year Jubilees. Multiple proofs this is unscriptural. So what I do is I actually say, okay, if people are dead set on this 50 years, then this is how it would work out. They would basically say this 50 years is a standalone year, and then it would basically make every year ending in 57 or 07 in BC, because 1406 is the entrance into the promised land, and that's when they begin to be counted. So you number 7 sevens, and in the 50th year, hallow and proclaim Jubilee. It would be every 50th year. So 1357 would be the first, and then 1307 down to the translation between BC and AD. About 6 minutes into the video, I take you up through AD. So we count down from BC to AD, and then we count up from 1 AD up to what the first Jubilee would be, which would be 44, and then 94. So then you assume pattern, okay? So it's years ending in 94 and years ending in 44 AD would be Jubilee years. The next Jubilee year would be 2044, and the 70th Jubilee would be 2094. Daniel 9 is a prophecy about 70s. Daniel was in the 70 years of Babylonian captivity, receiving the vision of the 70 weeks, prophesying about 70 AD also, but specifically that the 70th week would begin on the 70th Jubilee. If 1406 and you count by 50s, then the 70th Jubilee would be 2094. And to underscore this point, I actually go back up to the beginning and I say, okay, this is what people do, right? Is they say 120 times 50 equals 6,000. Well, let's actually use that same logic and see if you like the same answer, because 70 Jubilees times 50 is 3,500 years. So from 1406, that would be 2094. So do you still like that math? Because I'm going to guess that you don't. I'm going to guess that you don't. So I did this quick video just to show what that would actually wind up being and how erroneous this whole 50-year Jubilee cycles are. Simply because the Bible says in the 50th year does not mean that you are ever intended to count by 50s. And demonstrably in a 9-minute video, I showed you the truth of that. So basically what I'm going to do is take you to another chart now that I have on my academia page, where it shows you how we're actually supposed to count them to arrive at the correct conclusion. This whole chart is called a comprehensive Jubilee timeline, and it is a free resource on my academia page. This is all of the data points used to construct the timeline, which begins with the reigns of Solomon, moves into the 4th year of his reign, which is the first year that he began to build his temple, And then we're told in 1 Kings 6:1 that the 4th year of his reign was also the 480th year after the children of Israel came out of Egypt. We know they wandered in the desert for 40 years before entering the promised land, and it is that entry into the promised land where we begin the count of the 7 sevens, and then in the 50th year, hallow it and proclaim Jubilee. So basically what I have is a whole bunch of data points that lend to the construction of the timeline to first identify 1406, and then to count how do we count them. So basically what I have here is this little how to count Jubilees. And demonstrably, they are not plus or minus 50, they're plus or minus 49 to get to the 50th year, because you always have to start with the year that they're in. Remember, they were only 10 days into that year, so you obviously have to count 1406 as the first year, which sometimes people forget that you have to include that in your count and not count from there, just add plus or minus 50. So number 7 sevens, and then in the 50th year, which is 1357, hallow it and proclaim Jubilee. This is the same year that I had identified in my other video, but in the other video, it was a standalone year, and then the next period of 7 sevens would have begun in 1356. Counting this way, 1357 is year 1 of the next 7 sevens. So you're not losing a year. It's not the other way is not seamless to count. This is seamless to count. And truly what we need to understand about the Jubilee is that it's still part of the 7 sevens. It's not a standalone. And the reason I say this is because it is the periods of 7 that are the most important, not the periods of 50. It is the periods of 7 that draw the most attention. Reason why Daniel picked those up in his week's prophecy is because they are seamless periods. And it would have destroyed the integrity of his prophecy of 7 sevens if there were these extra standalone years also. Totally would have thrown off the counts. It would have destroyed it. So the only way that that works, Daniel's prophecy being proof that it has to be done this way, is if you do it this way. So then I have this period, or I have this table over here. We'll make this a little bit bigger. On here, I have all of the periods of 7 counted out, and then the 50th year, which is the first year of the next 7 sevens, I have in yellow. So you see that the 50th year is, the 70th year of the Jubilee patterns, if 1406, then 2025. Definitely better than 2094, but that is the 70th. And so you wouldn't count by 50s. It's not 70 Jubilees times 50 equals 3,500. And then you would add that to 1406. It's, what is it? What is it? Let's do this. Okay, so 70 times 50 equals this times this, 3,500. And then 1406 BC. So what's the difference between those two? That's going to tell you what the 70th Jubilee would be if you're counting by 50s. And again, I think that people aren't going to find that a very great answer to get. But if you're plus or minus 49 to get to the 50th year, then so that's 2024, except when you're moving from BC to AD, there's going to be a year 0. So you have to account that these years are taking a year 0 into account. So then you'd have to add 1. When you're taking out 0, then you have to add 1. So equals this plus this. What is going on? Oh, this plus this. There, 2025. Anyway, long story short. If you try to count by 50s, which is what people who say 120 times 50 equals 6,000 are doing, then you're also implicitly agreeing to a rapture in or around 2095. Okay? If you understand that the 50th year is plus or minus 49, because the 50th year is simply year 1 of the next period of 7 sevens, which are periods of 49, then you're putting a rapture in or around 2025. I'm going to guess that that is more agreeable to you by a lot. And it's not just that it's more agreeable, it's actually correct. So inherently what you're also understanding about this is it's not 120 times 50 equals 6,000. It's actually going to be 123 because you have to count backwards by plus or minus 49. There's going to be 123 Jubilees, not 120. That's going to be the closest you're going to get to 6,000. Plus this 70 or 70th week actually gives you 6,034 years of world history, not an exact 6,000. And that's where you have to really pay attention to what Peter's saying in 2 Peter 3. It's one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years as one day. He's telling you that you're supposed to use the likeness of the Sabbath, but using the word as tells you that it's in the likeness of and not identical to. So there's going to be approximately 6,000 years, not exactly 6,000. And when you use the way to count Jubilees from 1406 forward to the end, you use that same way to count backward to the beginning. And that is where we come to rest on this final chart that I will show you. Again, from 1406, there are 70, and that also means 40 since Jesus left, to the end, to when we are no longer fasting without our bridegroom. Because, you know, he fasted for 40 days, and he said that in Mark 1 and in Mark 2, he said that the bride's going to fast without her bridegroom. That's 40 Jubilees, so we're going to fast without him. So there are 70 from the beginning and 40 from the time that Jesus left, until the time that he returns, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. But if you use the same way to count backwards, it takes you to 4003 BC, and there are 123 Jubilees. 123 times 49 is 6,027, plus 7 years for the 70th week. That is 6,034 years of world history. So while 6,000 is a great approximation, it's not accurate, and it is definitely not precise.